your show. So,
guys, it's being live streamed.
So I think as Amrita says, because Amrita also can take from them, we can have Vashti, Lorena, and then Amrita.
Okay.
Is that okay for you, Vashti?
Yes, that's fine.
Now that we have the opportunity to have the Caribbean represented, we need to.
No pressure, Vashti, none. Trinidad is what you're going to talk about, so don't worry about it. I think we're live, guys, on Facebook.
We are live on Facebook, and we have people in the room. So
okay.
And just to remind you, Vashti, Yves, and Amrita, we have translation to Spanish. So just to speak, I mean, Jose Manuel is used to us, but just to try to do it a little bit slower.
I have a tendency to speak very quickly, but I slow my pace.
And remember, Vashti, most people are not accustomed to the beautiful accent from Trinidad. So, so yes, our Caribbean accent, sometimes we sing. We tend to sing when we speak.
Yes, because I'm in the process of completing my doctorate, and my supervisor is Professor Bergoglio from Malta.
Wow.
I have to speak with it for the last 4 years. I have to know to speak very slow with him.
Yes, exactly. So I guess, Dorothea, you'll start us off whenever you're ready, because we're at 12.
No, I just don't see the ambassador.
I know.
Hi, Mustafa. I see Mustafa and Werner that join us.
Good night, good day, guys.
And the ambassador just confirmed yesterday to Sandra. So
maybe we give him 5 minutes.
Hola, Lorena. Lorena, Amrita, Yaniv,
Hola.
Vashti.
Hello.
Lorena is from ProChile, which is the export promotion
Hello.
agency from Chile.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Lorena.
Nice to meet you too.
National Director.
Thank you, Dorothea.
I don't know, Yaniv, if we should wait or we should start and then we give him the.
When he comes, we just, I don't know, maybe we start, and when he comes, we.
Vashti, Jose Manuel is asking me if you can get closer to your micro because he's having
Better?
He feels that you have a lot of echo.
Is that better?
Is that better, Jose Manuel? José Manuel, ¿ahora está mejor? ¿La escuchas mejor? Ah, la perdimos. Thanks, Werner, for all your support.
Always. Maybe we give him until 5 after the hour and then start. What do you think? Did you have a question, Lorenzo?
A question or answer? No.
Lorena, did you have a question? I think I saw you put up. Can you hear us?
Me, myself?
No, Lorena.
¿Ya?
Did you have
Si tú nos puedes oír, Lorena.
Sí, yo los escucho, sí, bien, hasta ahora, bien.
Yes, she can hear us.
¿Tienes una pregunta?
¿No?
No.
Ah, Janine.
Ah, muy bien, Jan. Sí, para Dorothea.
Sí, Amrita, it's the first time we listen this. Hemos trabajado con ella por una
primera vez. Primera vez. Muy bien, Yaniv.
Hi, Alicia. Thanks for being with us. Hola, Rosa. Thanks. I don't know.
Let's hear. Vashti, let's hear if it's better.
Hi. Well, what?
Better.
You wouldn't believe what just happened. My laptop completely shut down, so I'm now using my iPhone.
Oh, God.
Oh,
But you're fine. Oh, but you had a PowerPoint, you said.
Well, I wouldn't use that. I'll just speak.
Oh gosh. Sorry about that. You can send it to us afterwards if you
Yes,
want.
sure.
Yes.
Dorotea,
Yaniv, ¿sí?
sobre una pregunta, disculpa en español. ¿Tengo que hacer algún cambio para la traducción de José Manuel al inglés desde aquí o no?
Sí,
¿O
si
sigo
tú
yo
quieres oírlo en
funcionando con el...
español, no. Tú nada. Si tú quieres oír en
Perfecto.
español, cambias en interpretación a español, pero
Perfecto,
José Manuel va a hacerlo solo.
Perfecto,
Yanis,
gracias.
I think gracias a ti. I think we should go on and then we will.
Okay.
Let's
shall
see.
we send a reminder? like a
Ambassador
reminder
Mina
email?
here.
Oh,
Ambassador
sure.
Mina is arriving, so we can start.
I start or you start? Me or you? Me
I
or-
don't know if Ambassador can hear us.
I think he can. Wonderful. Welcome, Ambassador. We're so happy to have you, and we understand how busy you must be at the end of the year. So we're gonna start now. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are across the world. My name is Yves Remy. I am one of the chairs of the Americas, and I form a tripartite team together with two other chairs from the Americas, Ms. Dorotea Lopez-Giral from the University of Chile, and I keep saying Miss Doctor, let me give the proper titles, and Dr. Amrita Bahri from ITAM University in Mexico. So the three of us, over the last couple of months, have come together to launch a series of projects relating to women and trade in the Americas. This segment of the project deals with all manner of topical issues which we present through webinars. This is, I believe, our fifth or our sixth webinar under the series. And we are so proud. This is organized by our chair from Chile, Dr. Dorotea Giral, and her team. And we're so proud to be able to close off the year with one of the exciting topics relating to the women and trade agenda, looking at export promotion and e-commerce for women in trade. We only have an hour for this segment, so we'll go pretty quickly with our introductions. I first would like to introduce and welcome our keynote speaker, Ambassador George Mina from the Embassy of Australia to the WTO, who is a senior career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and he was most recently, prior to his appointment, First Assistant Secretary, Consular and Crisis Management Division. He has previously served as Deputy Head of Mission in Paris and Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Australia to UNESCO. He holds a Master of Arts from the Australian National University and a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Melbourne. Ambassador Mina is going to deliver the keynote, after which I will introduce our other esteemed panelists who will speak also on the topic today. Over to you, Ambassador. Whilst Ambassador is getting the technical, we can't hear you as yet. I'll just remind person that there's a tab at the bottom that will indicate if you would like translation into English or Spanish. So please turn on the relevant language in which you would like the translation services applicable to you. Ambassador Mina, can you hear us? You can hear us. We can't hear you. No worries, no problem at all. What I will do in the meantime...
Probably you can try to get in again.
Yes, but what you can do whilst you sort out the technical difficulties, I will introduce our three other panelists. So unfortunately, our two other panelists, pardon me, one of our panelists will not be joining us today, and that is our panelist from the World Bank, Miss Heidi, just get her name, Miss Heidi Stensland Warren. Unfortunately, due to some emergency, she won't be joining us. But I'm very happy to introduce our second speaker, Miss Vashti G. She's the CEO of Trinidad and Tobago's Coalition of Services Industry. She has more than 50 years experience in research and development, policy design, SME development, global and institutional competitiveness, and international relations. She worked previously in academia, in the public and private sector, including the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business in Trinidad and Tobago, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Ministries of Energy and Public Administration. Welcome to you, Mrs. Guyadin. We're so happy to have you. And our second speaker, so after Ms. Guyadin speaks, is the director of ProChile, National Director of ProChile, Ms. Lorena Sepúlveda, who is an agricultural engineer and has a master's in public policies with specialization in marketing and commercial policy. Her work experience has been strongly linked to the field of design, implementation, and evaluation of public policies regarding the promotion of exports of goods and services and the internationalization of Chilean companies, as well as the administration of economic complementary agreements. So welcome to you, Ms. Lorena Sepúlveda and Ms. Vashti Guyadin, and of course the ambassador. And last but not least, we have, of course, our chair from ETAM, Ms. Dr. Amrita Bahri, who will speak after the other speakers, and she will end our discussion today. She is no stranger, obviously, to those of us who work in this field. She's the assistant professor of law at ETAM University in Mexico City. And as I mentioned before, she's one of the 3 chairs of the Americas. She has a PhD in international trade law from the University of Birmingham and an LLB in international business law from the London School of Economics. And she's well known in these circles as an international trade consultant, especially to the ITC, where she assisted them with one of the major drives relating to gender mainstreaming. So welcome to all of you panelists. I had said 2, but it is actually 3. We initially had a slate of 4. So really happy to have you, and all women on the panel besides the ambassador. So I don't know if the ambassador is having some trouble joining. So what I would propose that we do is actually get started on the discussion with our panelists. And whenever we get the ambassador, we will close off that discussion and we will listen to his keynote, because we only have an hour. If that meets with everyone's approval, let's start with Ms. Guyadin to give her remarks on export promotion and e-commerce with Trinidad and Tobago as the case study. Over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to speak today on how Trinidad and Tobago has mainstreamed a gender perspective within its trade policy. In its current trade policy, 2019 to 2023, the government stated that it is committed to identifying, understanding, and removing obstacles to the full participation of women in trade. They acknowledge that there are significant differences in the opportunities available to and challenges faced by women and men seeking entrepreneurial opportunities in the formal economy, and recognize that the creation of inclusive trade policies can contribute to advancing gender equality and women's economic empowerment, which can have a positive effect on economic growth, resilience, and poverty reduction. The trade policy also identifies constraints and challenges in ensuring that women are fully included in the national trade development agenda. These include a lack of disaggregated data by sex to inform policy, gender-based discriminatory practices without adequate remedy in law, and a lack of targeted public sector policies aimed at creating an enabling environment and infrastructure in support of women in trade. Thus, government has made a commitment in principle in ensuring that women fully participate in the development process. These statements have been written at the highest policy setting levels towards this commitment. However, to integrate women into the heart of national development, of which trade is only an instrument, it requires support systems and commitments in ensuring that these policies are actually implementable. We know that identifying the problem is the first step in finding a solution. In this light, I will focus a bit on what is happening at the ground level. In other words, what is the reality for the intended beneficiaries of these policies? What is the current state of women in trade in Trinidad and Tobago? How effective has these policies been? Without a doubt, Trinidad and Tobago has made significant inroads in advancing female entrepreneurs. According to the International Trade Center, in 2014, Trinidad and Tobago, roughly 21% of its export companies were led by women, along with Jamaica and Paraguay. We were recorded as the highest in the Americas region. Trinidad and Tobago also supported the Joint Declaration on Trade and Women's Economic Empowerment in December 2017. Trinidad and Tobago is the first country in the Caribbean to establish a She Trades Hub last year. Trinidad and Tobago also outperformed its CARICOM neighbors in several gender-specific indicators of progress under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. However, all these high-level achievements mean nothing if they are not translated into meaningful economic opportunities for women in Trinidad and Tobago. While this country has stated several policy initiatives to mainstream gender issues in trade development, the best way to evaluate the success of these policies is to examine the sectors that are dominated by women. These sectors are roughly business and professional services, business and events tourism, cultural and creative industries, education services, health and wellness services, personal care services, and retail and distribution. The Equal Opportunity Act prevents general discrimination. However, there is no specific requirement for equal pay for equal work between men and women. While there is general equality in pay in the public sector, studies have shown that women tend to earn 10% less in the private sector than their male counterparts. It was estimated that women earn roughly US $23,000 per annum on an average, while men earn roughly US $42,000. This difference is especially stark in agriculture. Research from the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago showed that men out-earn women in agriculture, forestries, and fisheries. Agriculture received roughly 500 million stimulus in our last budgetary allocation. While no one is questioning the importance of the agricultural sector, especially at the time of food shortages and rising food prices, If stimulus and investments are not done in a gender-sensitive way, then women would not stand to benefit from these measures. Females own only 14% of private land holdings in Trinidad and Tobago. Our policy approach reflects not only how we plan, but how we respond. The Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries research indicates that the hardest hit sectors from the global pandemic in terms of employment were arts and entertainment, recreation services, business and events, tourism, and retail, as well as personal care services. All these sectors are heavily female-dominated sectors. These are the very same sectors whose workers naturally experience the sharpest pay cuts, and similarly, who need urgent financing the most in the aftermath of the pandemic. Yet the support given to these sectors, both to survive and reopen, has been lacking. Even during the lockdowns and state of emergency, the manufacturing sector, a heavily male-dominated industry, was given exemptions to continue operating. And such measures have still not been extended to much of the female-dominated services industry. The ILO found that women in micro, small, and medium enterprises in Trinidad and Tobago are concentrated in establishments such as food processing and garment and catering, the latter of which were heavily decimated by the pandemic with little or no support. In the Caribbean in general, women are twice as likely to be unemployed, and this also contributes to their higher emigration rates, resulting in further brain drains of human resources. Data from the Business Development Company indicates a much higher approval rate for loans for male-owned SMEs than female-owned. While our trade policy was written pre-COVID, it was noted that there was a lack of evidence of macroeconomic planning and policy framework for considering a gender perspective. Now, let's just examine some of the core features of a gender-responsive trade policy. One,
Vashti, I'm just going to ask you maybe in about a couple minutes to kind of wind now. We can get back maybe in the Q&A.
Sure. So what does a gender-responsive policy looks like? It should focus on building resilient institutions that are agile so that they could respond to changes in the environment, specifically to female-owned businesses. And without a doubt, the major stumbling blocks for female entrepreneurs is the banking and financial provisions for women. There are, in Trinidad and Tobago, and indeed in the Caribbean region, women face significant difficulties in accessing loans, and this is because they need to have collateral, and the traditional form of collateral is the ownership of land. And as pointed out before, roughly 14% of private land holdings is owned by women in the country. On that note, I welcome questions and share much more information.
Thank you so much, Vashti. We will come back to you. I know it's a bit of a rush, but I just want to get the keynote in. I think Ambassador Mina is finally able to join us, Ambassador, and then we will go back to the panelist commentary afterwards. But thank you so much for that. Ambassador Mina, over to you.
Janice, I'm not sure if you can hear me now.
We can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Look, I'm very sorry about all that. There was a big problem with connection at our end, and my apologies for the late arrival. I just wondered if I could ask you, please, just at the outset, how long you want me to speak before we move on to the rest of the panel.
All right. 10 to 15 minutes, what I think would be a good, yes, thank you.
I'll be very happy to do that. And first of all, to say thank you to you, to the rest of the panel, to the chairs from Barbados, Mexico, and Chile, to give me this opportunity today. It's an extraordinarily privileged opportunity and a very impressive group you've assembled. An incredibly important topic. So thank you for this opportunity. I'll focus, Janice, on the overall approach that we take, Australia takes, to this question of integrating women and gender considerations into global trade and global trade policy. A bit of an overview, including not only on our trade policy, but our aid for trade efforts. I know you've got enormous talent in your panel, but also in your participants list. I've had the opportunity to review that just now too. So I look forward to the discussion, but in the main, I want to say that this is an incredibly important priority for Australian trade policy and Australian aid policy, because not only is it important from an ethical and moral and social policy perspective to integrate women into the global economy more fully, but it's also economically very important, ensuring we unleash the benefits to that section of humanity, which is half of humanity. So it is very, very important that we look at the opportunities that we have here. And it shows, when you look at the research, WTO research, OECD research, International Trade Center research, that those countries that discriminate, whether meaningfully or, intentionally or not intentionally, those countries that discriminate, you don't need me to say this to your audience, between genders, will have suboptimal economic outcomes. And I don't even also need to repeat the point that Vashti has already started on, that is that there are disproportionate impacts on women of a whole range of developments, including, of course, the pandemic. And Vashti was talking about the overrepresentation of women in food processing and in tourism, and also in textiles. I think I heard you say, Vashti, in textiles. Well, there's a range of sectors where that's also true. And they are the sectors that have been hit hardest, of course, by the pandemic. And we know that there's a disproportionate impact on one gender from those downturns. So, yeah, we don't need to rehearse why this is an important topic, but it is an incredibly important topic indeed. So what I wanted to talk about was, what are we doing about that in our aid and our trade policies? Let me start with trade policy. On trade policy, our approach is to focus on what is practical. I know a number of you will have seen this important work that was produced by the World Bank and the WTO some time ago now. I think it's at least a year, 15 months old. And it's a wonderful publication for those who haven't read it and absorbed it, but it talks about the role of trade in promoting gender equality, and conversely, the role of gender in trade policy and how one can better manage inclusion. Our own approach, Australia's approach, is to manage with the most pragmatic and practical tools that we have available. And they are trade policy tools. And I'll give you an example, e-commerce. I know you wanted me to focus in on export promotion, e-commerce. Well, I'll talk about e-commerce to start. Data from e-commerce platforms shows that women are more active in digital trade than in traditional forms of trade. So when we look at, for instance, a McKinsey report recently that showed that women-led businesses in Indonesia generated 35% of online commerce, online revenues. But you look at the same cohort in Indonesia in the offline environment, and it's only 15%. Still not enough in the online environment, but it clearly is a much more accessible environment for women. And we also know that the digital economy has been transformed, accelerated through the pandemic. And this heightens the significance of this point we're making. So what do you do about that? Well, I think a couple of things that are obvious. Number one, you accelerate the digital transformation through trade rules. You boost access to global markets by making e-commerce rules more harmonized, by making e-commerce more accessible, by making sure that governments have in place policies that promote the uptake and the adoption of e-commerce in domestic frameworks. And that's exactly what we're doing at the World Trade Organization with the current initiative we have underway on the e-commerce rulemaking front. What we can also do is support those efforts. Remember that all of these efforts are dependent on national capacity and infrastructure. So one example is the need for digital infrastructure. And we have in Australia something we call the E-commerce Aid for Trade Fund. It's $5.5 million. It's across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and it works with partner governments on a range of activities to address the deficit in access to ICT technology and finance. And of course, across the region, this is not a huge amount of money, but it is a catalyzing amount of money to ensure that we can get grant recipients focused on moving gender into uptake of ICT. A good example of what we've been able to achieve is in Laos, where we had 10 micro enterprises benefiting from capacity building work, and many of these, in fact, the vast majority were women owned, and we've had a huge uptake of online activity in that environment, online commerce in that environment. We've got about $100 million in Australia devoted to investing in women and the Investing in Women program, and that also targets private sector development, small and medium-sized enterprises, and so forth. Now, I talked a bit about e-commerce there, whether it's trade policy or the aid for trade support for those efforts. But I want to also talk about another initiative we've been working on recently, and that is on making sure that the services sector is getting a boost in its development. Again, we know that women are heavily represented in the services sector, and one of the most hardest hit areas of the global economy during the pandemic has been areas like finance, tourism, transport, and a range of other services where women happen to be highly represented. So we look at those sectors, we look at how we liberalise the opportunities in those sectors, and we look at the domestic regulation initiative, which has just been agreed at the WTO, a major step forward at the WTO in improving the regulation of the services sector, where so many of the barriers lie. Behind the border barriers, licensing, qualification requirements, and so forth. So we're trying to get rid of these barriers, and in doing so, we are promoting the inclusion of women in key sectors of economic growth following the pandemic. I want to just mention one last initiative, if I can, Yves, and then I might stop and let you quiz me or let your panel quiz me. But a third area I wanted to mention is, while we've been talking about two issue areas, e-commerce and services, we've also got to take the step back and look at gender and trade more generally. How do we put a gender lens on trade? And there is some important work going on at the WTO at the moment on this front. There is a WTO informal working group on trade and gender. That group was launched at MC11. The group has been working hard since MC11 to think systematically how we promote trade and gender issues at the WTO in all of our rulemaking efforts, because this cross-cutting issue was not seen in systematic terms, until quite recently. And we've been thinking about a work program to contribute not only on trade policy, but also on aid for trade, and how we integrate our efforts into aid for trade in a more systematic way. We've got a declaration that has an enormous amount of support, in fact, 121 co-sponsors. We will take that up whenever we can get to MC12, and you will see enormous enthusiasm around that when it's launched, that work program in the declaration. And we look to use that as a way to more habitually and systematically integrate gender considerations into our work here at the World Trade Organization. So that's a very exciting development, and one where it will allow us all to share expertise, because we're doing all this work at a national level, and we're not necessarily benefiting one from the other, what we're all learning in our own national experiences. So this is a big step forward to take at the WTO. So look, I might just leave it there, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, apologies, I haven't been able to get into the technology in a timely way, but I'm here with you now. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I'm also conscious that Vashti had some issues also with her laptop. She had a PowerPoint. So what I'm hoping we can do so that we can get, because I realized we cut her off, what I'm hoping we can do to get things back on track is I'm going to ask the remaining two speakers to really limit their interventions to 10 minutes so that we make sure we can get Vashti to get back on her present, to give her last remaining presentation. And then we can open it up to Q&A if we have any questions. So over to you, Lorena, and then Amrita, you soon after, and then we'll give Vashti her closing time, and then we'll address any questions we have. Over to you, Lorena.
Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Un saludo muy afectuoso desde Chile a todas y a todos. Quiero compartir de manera muy en la práctica lo que ProChile, lo que la Organización de Promoción de Exportaciones de Chile realiza para generar y para promover un comercio más inclusivo, un comercio y unas exportaciones más inclusivas. Quiero también enviar un saludo a los equipos de ProChile que hoy día están conectados y a nuestra querida exdirectora de ProChile, Alicia Fromm. Permítanme darle un cariño ahí afectuoso. Quiero ver que todo se vea bien la presentación y partir con un pequeño video respecto de lo que es entonces el programa en específico de Mujer Exporta.
ProChile es el servicio dependiente del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores, a cargo de promover la oferta exportable de bienes y servicios chilenos y de contribuir al desarrollo mediante la internacionalización de las empresas locales, así como la promoción de la imagen país, de la inversión extranjera y del turismo. La inclusión y fortalecimiento de la mujer en el comercio internacional es uno de nuestros ejes estratégicos en ProChile.
Bueno, como se señalaba en el video, que espero que lo hayan podido escuchar y ver muy bien, uno de los focos esenciales del trabajo de ProChile ha tenido que ver desde hace muchos años con cómo generamos un comercio más inclusivo a través de las exportaciones y cómo las empresas lideradas con mujeres y aquellas también que vienen desde iniciativas de personas pertenecientes a los pueblos originarios, también avanzan en su proceso de inclusión y de internacionalización hacia el mundo. Y desde este punto de vista, los programas que hemos desarrollado y que queremos compartir en los próximos minutos tienen tres principios centrales. Uno, promover claramente la equidad de género, porque creemos que el comercio internacional es una herramienta para actuar activamente en esta materia. Lo segundo, los programas permiten reducir las brechas, porque nos damos cuenta que este tipo de empresas en específico tienen brechas distintas que las otras, que las comunes. Y lo tercero es promover y fortalecer todos los desafíos crecientes para un proceso de internacionalización exitoso. Compartir con ustedes una radiografía hecha hace un tiempo atrás que representa en el fondo cómo es el comportamiento o cómo están los números en términos de la participación de empresas lideradas por mujeres en nuestras exportaciones, y que siempre uno tiene que estar viendo muy claramente cómo van estos indicadores para ir viendo si la política pública que se ejecuta a través de los programas que realizamos está en el sentido correcto. Solo compartir que ProChile ha trabajado con alrededor de 1.250 empresas lideradas por mujeres, y en este marco 472 son exportadoras directas y que aparecen en los registros de aduana nuestra. Y estas 472 empresas representan alrededor de un 6,2% de las empresas totales exportadoras nacionales, lo cual es una tasa que ha sido creciente e interesantemente desarrollada y también soportada por los programas que llevamos adelante. Estas empresas hoy día están exportando en promedio alrededor de $1 millón y representan un 2,9% total de las exportaciones no cobre de Chile. De estas empresas, el 67% está vinculada a exportadoras de alimentos, y allí hay un foco importante, y tenemos un 1% solo de empresas que están vinculadas al ámbito de los servicios. Y ahí compartimos el desafío tremendo nuestro de poder seguir impulsando estas empresas para que sigan su camino de internacionalización. Y también un 93% de las exportaciones de estas empresas se vinculan con mercados con TLC. Por tanto, también tenemos ahí un impacto importante y una herramienta tremendamente importante para hacer más competitiva a nuestras empresas y que permiten los tratados de libre comercio generar este espacio más competitivo para que ellas puedan seguir exportando. En términos generales, los programas de ProChile llevan 3 grandes herramientas que apuntan a los objetivos que ustedes ven ahí. Una primera etapa muy importante que tiene que ver con instalar y con fortalecer las capacidades en las empresas para poder hacer un proceso de internacionalización exitoso. Y aquí informar que estamos trabajando también fuertemente con una norma chilena que es la 3262, que acredita en el fondo un trabajo importante de conciliación de vida familiar, laboral y personal con perspectiva de género. Y aquí hay un acuerdo que hicimos con el Ministerio de la Mujer para promover esta norma al interior de las empresas. Y un conjunto muy grande de talleres y de seminarios y de acciones con expertos para mover la frontera, digamos, de la formación. Una segunda capa de herramientas que apuntan específicamente a la internacionalización con el foco de promover una oferta exportable de valor agregado y que permita ser también competitiva. Y aquí tenemos muy buenas herramientas y programas que han sido ya trabajados hace largos años con empresas y con mercados específicos como el mercado de Colombia, como el mercado de Canadá, etc. Más adelante vamos a ver algunas herramientas en específico. Y finalmente, un ámbito muy, muy importante que tiene que ver con herramientas y con acciones que permiten crear un ecosistema, posicionar y generar networking. Yo creo que uno de los ámbitos y de las brechas más importantes que hemos detectado es que las empresas lideradas por mujeres y las pymes igual están muy solas, y por tanto estos procesos de asociatividad y estos procesos de generar redes abren realmente las posibilidades de poder hacer un proceso, digamos, mayor de internacionalización. Y ustedes pueden ver ahí con distintas entidades internacionales, programas muy bonitos como con ONU Mujer, con Corfo y con otras más, digamos, para poder generar y ampliar esta red de networking, ¿no? Compartir también algunas acciones que hemos hecho que tienen que ver con foco de mujer. Recientemente hablábamos de cómo nos ha afectado la pandemia y uno de los grandes puntos es cómo hemos sido capaces de abordar los programas de una manera presencial a una manera digital. Y aquí hay un ejemplo muy importante de la primera feria digital que se hizo en torno al programa de Mujer Exporta y que nos permitió poner en una plataforma a 87 empresas lideradas por mujeres, indexadas por oferta exportable y que recibieron una cantidad importante de visitas, tanto nacionales como internacionales, para visibilizar esta oferta de un gran valor, de un gran valor agregado, ¿no? Otro ejemplo de actividades de ProChile ha tenido fuertemente que ver con lo siguiente, también con cómo vamos adecuando nuestras herramientas, y este es un programa nuevo que se llama Unboxing, que tiene que ver con cómo posicionamos en nuestros importadores, en los líderes de opinión y en nuestros influenciadores esta oferta exportable proveniente de empresas lideradas por mujeres. Y acá podemos ver un ejemplo de estas cajas que llegan y que los importadores y que los influenciadores pueden ver, experimentar y evidenciar estos productos y estos servicios de empresas lideradas por mujeres. Esto es algo que se hizo también para mujeres y para empresas provenientes de pueblos originarios. Para ir también avanzando, otro espacio importante es cómo desde ProChile también hemos ido adecuando las herramientas tradicionales a un enfoque de género. Y aquí destacar un programa que se llama ProChile a tu medida, que ha sido muy importante para dos cosas: para entregar un mejor asesoramiento en la definición de un programa, de un modelo de negocio, y dos, de carácter exportador y de carácter de internacionalización, y dos, una vez ya rediseñado este programa, cómo lo podemos hacer también una fase de internacionalización, es decir, una primera fase de aceleramiento y una fase segundo ya de internacionalización. Y este ha sido también customizado para las brechas que hemos detectado en el caso de empresas lideradas por mujeres. Aquí también compartir con ustedes algunas de las actividades que hemos hecho y que yo creo que han ido plasmando ya los resultados que muchas empresas hoy día pueden decir que forman parte de la canasta exportadora de Chile. Ven ahí en el fondo todas las muestras de productos y de servicios también de empresas lideradas por mujeres en distintos mercados tremendamente sofisticados, como el mercado de Australia o el mercado de México, y cómo nuestros productos con valor, pongo el ejemplo ahí de un jean que sacó un premio internacional de una empresa liderada por mujeres de la zona de Atacama de Chile. En fin, vamos viendo cómo estos programas van armando una oferta mucho más robusta en términos muy concretos de nuestras empresas que pueden ir abordando de manera exitosa los mercados internacionales. Acá podemos ver algunos ejemplos también de mujeres tremendamente valiosas que han salido adelante con sus empresas exportadoras, ejemplos de trufas o ejemplos de empresas que tienen servicios para la educación o ejemplos de empresas que hoy día están en todo el mundo de las energías renovables no convencionales y están entregando servicios a mercados en Latinoamérica para poder avanzar en estos desafíos, ¿no? Finalmente, compartir con ustedes los principales desafíos que tenemos, que tienen que ver, sin lugar a dudas, con seguir superando las brechas tanto de información, las brechas de generación de redes y las brechas también de poder insertar de manera exitosa a estas empresas en los mercados internacionales, y con eso lograr realmente un impacto importante en esta equidad de género. Quedar hasta acá, ser muy precisa con los minutos que me han dado, agradecer los tiempos y quedar totalmente a disposición para conversar más tarde. Muchas gracias, Jan.
Wow, Lorena, I have never seen somebody stick so well to the time and pack so much in. I think it really was helped by the wonderful pictures as well that you had. So to you, that was excellent, and thank you so much for that. And it complements what our two previous speakers had said about their own experiences. So we're off to a wonderful sort of initial discussion. I'm going to go really quickly now to Amrita for her 10 minutes, and then we'll go back and see what we missed off in the first round. Over to you, Amrita.
Sure, thank you, Genevieve. Now from e-commerce, trade, digital trade, I would like to move the discussion on how blockchain in particular has changed the landscape of international trade and whether it really has the potential to empower women. In doing so, I will try and focus on three different questions. First, how can we use, if at all, blockchain technology to empower women, economically speaking? Second, are there any downsides to using blockchain for women in trade? And third, what is needed to ensure that the use of blockchain narrows and not widens the gender gap? So far, we have heard from Ambassador Meena and from my fellow speakers how and why digital trade is here to stay. But the question is whether this digital trade or e-commerce would widen the existing gender gap, or can this help empower women? In my recent chapter included in the WTO Chair's publication on digital trade, I focused on how blockchain can help women's businesses access economic opportunities. So back to my first point, how does blockchain help and can it help? There are three key potential benefits that I would like to bring on the table here to begin with. First, access to finance. Second, gaining official identification. And third, market access. Approximately 50% of women in the world do not have access to a simple bank account. In rural areas of low-income countries, only about 20% of bank account holders are women. So women without bank accounts have no credit history and hence limited access to credit, right? And this barrier is absolutely being worsened by the ongoing pandemic. In a world where majority of women still cannot access a simple bank account, let alone other advanced financial instruments for carrying out and for increasing their exporting capacities for women-owned SMEs and MSMEs, blockchain can allow unbanked women to carry out payment transactions on a peer-to-peer basis without the need for a third-party intermediary's intervention. The second benefit is that of official identification. According to World Bank, women in developing countries are less likely than men to hold an official identification document. Talking about simple official identification documents such as a birth certificate, a passport, or even a national identification card. In certain countries, as we speak, married women cannot apply for a national identity card in the same way as married men. In fact, I never realized that I did not have a birth certificate up until 2009, 2010, because apparently it is very common for hospitals to not issue a birth certificate on the birth of a girl child in the country where I was born in. So blockchain can allow people without such important identification documents to create their own digital identity. And the question of identity, as we all understand, determines one's ability to work, do business, travel, enter into contracts, and register businesses. And the third benefit, possible benefit of blockchain in trade is its capacity to reduce trade cost for women-owned MSMEs and help these MSMEs to become more resilient to pandemic-like situations and other crises. As we understand by now, trade involves a lot of paperwork, and there are problems associated with that. We now know that trade via paper documents is not pandemic friendly. During pandemic, there were problems in processing transactions that required paper documents. There were problems in printing or scanning the documents when people were at their homes, shipping these documents to empty offices, trying to ship them through FedEx and alike when the courier services were completely disrupted. So trade did not stop during the pandemic, but the ability to trade through documents was paused, right? So blockchain-based applications can help MSMEs in the future to strengthen their ability to trade and be resilient to such pandemic-like situations where trade may simply not be possible through paperwork, through documents. That brings me to my second point, the downsides. So there are benefits, various benefits that blockchain technology can offer to women in trade, but it's not a magic wand. This operative system cannot change laws and customs. It cannot reconstruct the societal setup and beliefs. Moreover, customer adoption is a huge challenge because one, users may not have the required infrastructure resources, such as access to internet and smart devices. And two, users may not know how to use, for instance, a blockchain-based mobile application to receive or send money or initiate a smart contract, right? And then the need to adapt to digital technology amidst the pandemic has increased the cost of trading, mainly for small businesses. With insufficient financial means, small businesses have problems in covering these rising costs as they're required to invest more in pandemic-induced inspections, revised certifications, standards compliance, and so on and so forth. So this shows how COVID-19 pandemic has made doing business and business models more complex, and that the trade digitization is perhaps yet another challenge for women entrepreneurs and employees that they need to harness in the future. So just like free trade, unregulated digital trade can create more barriers for women, as it can, or it has the potential to widen the existing digital divide. And that brings me to my last point. What is needed to ensure that blockchain furthers inclusiveness by empowering women? I would say 2 items should be pretty high on the list, on the agenda. One, increasing women's access to digital learning and technology and infrastructure, required infrastructure. And 2, having robust regulations that are coherent and relevant. Lack of regulation or prohibitive regulation in a country can be a serious impediment, because the law may not recognize these digital kinds of transactions and documents created and saved using blockchain's distributed ledger. Blockchain is regulated differently in different parts of the world. So the problem here is that a domestic regulation may not work, as use of blockchain for trade transactions may cross various international frontiers. What is required is a multilateral regulatory framework for regulatory coherence. And this is where multilateral organizations such as World Trade Organization can play an important role. And up until a few days from now, whenever I presented this particular chapter on blockchain trade and women, I probably said at the end that I don't think the time is right for a multilateral organization like World Trade Organization to sort of take an action and come up with a set of guidelines and recommendations or a hard law on this respect. However, I've had to move from my position, especially in light of the major advances, the major developments we have seen in respect of the joint statement initiative negotiations in respect of e-commerce that Ambassador Mina is leading. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we would soon have a set of guidelines and that would lead to a possible future multilateral, coherent, and relevant framework of regulation to produce conducive conditions for these technologies to help women in their growth trajectory in the future. I'll stop here and welcome comments and questions.
That's another to-the-minute presentation. So everybody, thank you so much, Amrita, for really taking the discussion to the actual technologies and the pros and the cons of one of the most perhaps innovative new ones, which is the use of blockchain, and how we can maneuver that technology for women's empowerment, but conscious also of the possible shortcomings that we have to overcome. So that was a wonderful first round. As I mentioned before, what I'm going to do is we started a little bit late. So I'm going to, as the chair or the moderator, allow the speakers an extra, 5 minutes in the overall time to reflect on some of the questions that were raised, some directly to speakers. So I saw there was a question to Mrs. Guyadine, which is, what are the actions with successful results to prevent discrimination against women in commerce? And also one to Ambassador Mina, which is, do you have any success stories of overcoming discrimination? So Ms. Guyadine, as I said, I'm going to allow you a little bit of time because we had to cut you off to finalize your conclusion and just ponder on any of the things you've heard over the last 40 minutes or so that you may want to put a finer point on as we go through the last round of interventions. Over to you.
Sure, thank you. So just picking up where Amrita left us there, because this was one of my key issues in my presentation. It's the banking and commercial sector. Because over the past, I would say, since March of last year to now, TTCSI have completed roughly 10 surveys amongst our membership. And I would like to say that our surveys now has a regional appeal in terms of we have been project managing the Services Go Global. It's a training program for entrepreneurs who want to export. It was developed by Caribbean Export with EU funding. And through that program and the surveys that we have conducted, one of the top obstacles that entrepreneurs pointed out was difficulties in accessing loans and financing from commercial banks. And our data illustrates that roughly 30% of females who apply for loans. Within 7 Caribbean countries, 30% were able to get loans. And these are people who are, these are women who have degrees, first degrees, master's degrees, but still it's difficult for them to access loans. So we need to drill deeper to finding out why. So much so that TTCSI undertook some consultations with the Banking Association in Trinidad and Tobago, because these are sectors that traditionally they don't know about. And I have to say, I'll give you the example of the animation sector. And there is, I'm not sensing that need to learn about these new sectors. We would see that new financial instruments, products are introduced in the Dominican Republic when we organize information sharing sessions to learn what products are available. There is no enthusiasm within the Caribbean by the commercial entities to learn about these new sectors. So that is a big stumbling block. So I'm very glad that you brought up that point about blockchain, because we have also a drive in Trinidad and Tobago about fintech, and that's maybe an option for these other service providers, because definitely they are butting their heads against the commercial banks.
Thank you so much for that. That was a wonderful perspective. And I know your entity, the TTCSI, is doing a lot of work, that kind of very primary work in getting the data relating to the barriers women face. So that is excellent. Now I'm going to do myself a disservice and ask a question that's coming from Facebook in Spanish. And Lorenzo, it's to you. ¿Cuál ha sido el impacto en las exportaciones de los tratados de libre comercio y su capítulo de género y cómo se coordinan? And to Amrita, the question is, there are different modalities to further financial inclusion for women. Why recommend blockchain, which still holds so many risks because of its lack of regulation? So we're going to go in the order. Ambassador Mina, I called out a question to you, Lorena to you, and then over to you, Amrita. And as you make your comments, if you can conclude as well. Over to you, Ambassador.
Well, thank you again, Janice. Look, I think that's an excellent question that's been posed to me by Rosa. And she also offers me something that I find very confronting, which is a kangaroo hug. Now, I don't know, Rosa, if you've ever met a kangaroo, but they don't hug very readily. They can be very violent and they can be very aggressive. And so be very careful about Australian animals. Koalas are even worse. They can scratch your eyes out. But anyway, I'll move on. I think the key thing here is your question, what has been success and what have we got to do more on? The success, I'll give you a good, quick, practical example. Just 2 weeks ago, we concluded a major new deal here on services. And as I said earlier, it was about regulation behind the border, where women are very heavily represented in those services industries, tourism, transport, you name it. Now, that's a good thing. But what I didn't mention is one of the very direct and tangible successes, which is the first time in a global trade deal, we have a new rule of non-discrimination between the genders. And the Domestic Regulation Initiative includes this new rule. There should be no discrimination in the application of regulation between the genders. It's a great success. And already we're finding it's encouraging people to think about regulation in a different way. Behind the border, services regulation in national jurisdictions. So it's a very big success, and it reinforces what Amrita was just talking about, the need for coherent and relevant regulation. I like that phrase very much, Amrita. I might just conclude by saying we've got a lot of work to do, McKinsey estimates that if we get gender right in trade, they say we will improve global GDP to the tune of $1 trillion in 2030. And the work is across all areas. Financial inclusion, which we're just hearing from Amrita about, public procurement, just the general question of women in digital trade, and of course the whole question of looking at the way we construct trade policy. What kind of engagement do women have in forming trade policy? I mean, I'm lucky enough to have in my team here a very vibrant group of women that are my negotiators, my trade policy makers. That helps with the whole issue of making good trade policy. I will, because I'm good at putting other publications up, I'll put another one up. This one was produced by the International Trade Centre, Pamela Coke-Hamilton. A lot of you will know her and her outfit, the International Gender Champion, sort of sponsored also by the Australian government. It's called Delivering on the Buenos Aires Declaration, and it's all about gender, trade and women's economic empowerment at the WTO. So it's about these questions that Rosa has asked about. What more is to be done? An enormous amount, and have a read of it. I've put the link on, John Yves, and I hope you can distribute it as well as the other publication I mentioned earlier. It's been an absolute privilege being part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you, and all of the publications that you have given us, I will share within the chat. Lorena and then Amrita, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Ya, si me puedes repetir la pregunta, entendí que tenía que ver fundamentalmente con el tema de los acuerdos de libre comercio y en los capítulos de género, ¿no?
Entiendo que
I
la
think so.
pregunta
Anybody
es...
better at Spanish than me can read it. I don't know, Dorothea, if you want to reread it. It's in the chat, but I'll try again.
La pregunta,
Yes, go
la
ahead.
pregunta es si ustedes...
Gracias, Dorotea, que no puedo ver el chat yo.
La pregunta es si ustedes han evaluado el impacto que han tenido los capítulos de género sobre las exportaciones y cómo se vincula esos capítulos de género con el trabajo de ProChile.
Sí, gracias por la pregunta. Sí, no, como ProChile no hemos tenido una evaluación respecto de los impactos como tal, porque hacer eso realmente es un trabajo bien sensible, ¿no? Pero sí hay, por supuesto, una coordinación, toda la negociación de los capítulos, la introducción de los capítulos de género han dado un marco y una serie, digamos, de beneficios desde dos puntos de vista. Uno que tiene que ver con el compromiso en esta materia, con los compromisos internacionales y cómo se abordan, y dos espacios muy importantes de cooperación y de compartir experiencias y las mejores experiencias de cómo abordar un proceso de internacionalización en esto. Así que desde ese punto de vista, claro que hay resultados, no hay una evaluación de impacto propiamente tal, pero sí son una antesala tremendamente importante para poder seguir construyendo este tema de equidad de género, y cómo esta, digamos, se puede realmente materializar y llevar a través de las exportaciones. Este programa de ProChile de Mujer Exporta, que ya lleva muchos años, nos ha podido dar cuenta que sí es posible hacerlo, con la superación de estas brechas que yo mencionaba. Las empresas lideradas por mujeres logran insertarse de manera permanente en el comercio exterior, logran hacer exportaciones, y cuando vemos que estas empresas logran crecer también, eso impacta de manera directa sobre el bienestar, no solo de la empresa, sino que también de sus familias, y eso es tremendamente importante, a diferencia probablemente de otros impactos con otro tipo de empresas. Y de ahí entonces que es muy relevante continuar esto, y el compromiso está en solo seguir profundizando. Y también vemos con el correr del tiempo que hay muchas empresas y lideradas por mujeres vinculadas al área de innovación y emprendimiento. Y ahí tenemos grandes temas que están saliendo hoy en día y que nacen también de una manera global. Por tanto, estamos tremendamente comprometidos con este tipo de desafíos y creemos que es totalmente posible con estos programas que ProChile lleva a cabo. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos por este espacio. He aprendido mucho de todo lo que ha salido acá. Así que nos llevamos también este conocimiento y esta red para seguir construyendo un mejor Mujeres Exportan. Muchas gracias.
Yaniv, do you have your micro off?
Oh, yes, thank you so much, Lorena. That was excellent as well. Please, Amrita, you can continue and end the webinar.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Alicia, for this wonderful question. Again, $1 million question this is. But yeah, blockchain, you're absolutely right. It is not the only and not the most effective modality as of today for financial inclusion, for promoting financial inclusion. But the fact remains that blockchain has already been employed. And the fact remains that it is already changing the landscape of international trade, of how we trade today. So although blockchain emerged within the financial system, let's say with the launch of crypto currencies like Bitcoin, today it is being used in a wide range of activities relating to foreign trade. So it has gone way beyond financial instruments and trading credit instruments, including the ones that are indirectly related to foreign trade as well. It is impacting value chains, supply chains, production of goods and services, and so on and so forth. So there are risks, and we all agree that a coherent regulation is not ready for it in most of the countries, and a multilateral regulation is far from being there. But I don't think that would stop blockchain from changing the way we trade today, and from changing the way we will trade in the future, in the very near future, I would say. So I'm not trying to argue that blockchain is the best possible modality to achieve financial inclusion. But what I'm trying to perhaps table in my chapter is that if it is to happen, we need to ensure that it does not take women for a ride, and that we can ensure that it works, or it can be made to work for women empowerment as well. So it could be seen as a necessary evil or an unnecessary good, but it is being accepted as an opportunity by businesses engaged in international trade. So and there are various problems associated with it, but we need to find the opportunities and the right opportunities to empower women.
Excellent. Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Ambassador Mina. Thank you, Ms. Lorena Sepúlveda, and thank you, Ms. Vashti G. And of course, I want to thank you, the audience on Facebook, as well as on the Zoom call, for joining us. The WTO chairs at the WTO Secretariat Division, Mustafa, Verna, and the team. And of course, Dorothea and her team at the University of Chile for organizing this webinar with me, Amrita, as well as the other, together as chairs of the Americas. So without further ado, I want to wish you all a wonderful season. A lot of work to be done, as you have said, some wonderful examples coming out of Chile, the Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Australia, and that overarching concern of blockchain raised by Amrita. We have a lot of food for thought. Let me just say goodbye and thank you again for joining us. Dorothea, I don't know if you had any words you wanted to end with, but if not, goodbye everyone, and have a wonderful season and a happy new year. Thank you.